So the session is all about discovering what skills are needed to be a great coach, thinking about how we listen, what we're listening out for that might be different in a coaching conversation to a conversation we might be having with family or friends, for example. The temptation is that when somebody comes to us with a problem, very often, particularly if you're in a line management role or a role where you're looking to work with that group of people and collaborate, people come to you with a problem, and the temptation is to take that problem away from them and fix it and gift wrap it and hand it back to them. But we don't want to do that. That doesn't empower people to be able to fix problems for themselves. So we want to kind of move away from that. We want to enable people to successfully fix some of those problems and challenges that they're experiencing themselves, where they have the skills and the capacity to do that. So we'll be exploring both of those things. One of the things that David Marquet talks about in his work is creating an organisation of thinkers, creating an organisation of people where they think and solve problems for themselves. Last year, I was coaching somebody who was head teacher of a school, and people would come to her to sort out the tiniest, minutiae, detailed problem that was well within their capacity and capability to fix, but they didn't. So we did some work around kind of exploring why that might be. And very often it's how we respond to people who are having something they're a bit stuck on. If our inclination is to fix it for them, then they're just going to come to us and expect us to do that. We need to set some different, perhaps, expectations and then help and support them to solve their own problems. And we're going to talk about a model that's going to help you to do that during our time together today. So we're moving away from the leader being the person who solves the problem to the leader who coaches the person to help them solve a problem for themselves. And we know through a lot of work that's been done around research, around coaching and how our brains work, if people come up with the problem, the solution to the problem themselves, they're much more likely to take ownership, to feel the urge to fix that and follow through on the actions themselves. Some mindsets, some tips to help us as we create that sense of people feeling empowered and being able to do things for themselves. We want to be present. That's one of the reasons that I suggested you might turn off some of the things that might be pinging and dinging at you right now. That enables us to focus on the conversation that we're having, to be less distracted. Not many people are very good at multitasking, less than 2% of the population. So what do we need to do in order to be present and show up for each other in this way? How do we stay open-minded? Very often somebody might come and present to us a particular problem, something that they're struggling with, and we think, oh, I know the answer because I've had this before. But actually, once we delve in a bit deeper, once we start to explore, we understand that the problem or the challenge is slightly different. Although it might initially seem like it's being presented in the same way. So we want to hold back from our judgments and our experience that we might bring to this particular problem. There will be an opportunity to share that further down in our model. But for the moment, in this outset, we want to stay curious. We want to be able to ask questions. We want to be able to seek to understand more about the problem. And sometimes when we're seeking to understand more and somebody voices something out loud and it clarifies something for them, that's helpful as part of the process as well. So we're listening to understand rather than listening to jump in with our suggestions, rather than listening to say, oh, this person's felt listened to, tick box and move on to the next thing. There's a temptation, I think, when people come along with a challenge for us to prove that we have knowledge, that we have skills and expertise that can help them. Sometimes we might want to prove it's not our fault that we haven't done something wrong, and we can seek to try and prove ourselves and justify rather than keeping an open mind, staying curious. And what that open mind and staying curious helps us to do is to look to improve rather than prove that we've done well. I had a conversation with somebody earlier this week, this morning, actually, it feels like a long time ago. They were asking me to do something slightly different. And I was kind of thinking, well, that's kind of what I've been doing with a very small tweak. but as I asked more questions, as I was kind of understanding how that's what I thought of as quite a small adjustment, was explained from their perspective. It's like, oh, I can see that actually my way of doing it that I was thinking was helpful was actually quite unhelpful to them and their systems and their processes. So that's helped me to be able to improve how I do something. And it also says there, have fun. We want to kind of explore this, look to learn, understand, and bring that sense of fun and creativity to the work that we're doing with other people. I can see a few more people have joined us since we kicked off, so that's wonderful. Great to see you all here today. I did invite people earlier on, if you've got specific questions, to head to the chat, sorry, not to the chat, to head to the Q&A to post your questions there. I'm going to talk through the content of some of our coaching to empower session for about another 20 minutes, hopefully give you lots of things that you can go and take away and use. And then we'll do a bit more of a Q&A in the last part of our session. So coaching to empower them, what do we mean by this? Why is it a good thing? Well, what we want to help people to do is to think through problems in a very particular way. I mentioned earlier that idea of proving versus improving. Some of the organisations and cultures that I've worked in, there's a real sense of blame. Where do we put the blame? We want to move away from thinking about that and to instead tackle problems with how do we make this better? How do we move quite quickly from what's the problem to where might the best solution lie? So we want to help our people, the people that we're working with and engaging with, to become better problem solvers. And we become better problem solvers by better understanding the problem. And that helps us to understand it. And that's what this model will introduce you to. Sometimes when we come across something that's a bit difficult, we come up with a few ideas. We don't really have that much confidence in any of them. So it can make it difficult to decide what direction to take. It can make it difficult to implement perhaps some of those changes, improvements that we're looking to make. So we want to give people that we're working with a much better sense of confidence in the choices and decisions that they're making. It might be a wrong decision, or it might not quite work out as they expect, but that's okay, we can learn from that. This approach also reduces dependence on you as the person's leader. A lot of the people I coach in the first 5 years of their management career, and people often say, I didn't realise managing people takes up so much time. And it especially takes up a lot of time when people are expecting us to solve their problems. So it might involve a few more minutes at the outset as we start to implement this empowering approach. But in the long run, it's going to save us lots of time and energy, actually. And it helps people to grow, it helps people to think for themselves and tap into their creativity and their ability to solve a problem. Doesn't it feel good when you know that somebody really believes in you, knows that you can solve this, believes that you have the ability to do the work, tackle the challenges, and come out the other side? So that's why we think this model is a good and helpful thing. There are 5 steps to the model. The first one is to listen to the problem. And as I said before, we're listening for some very specific things in our coaching conversations. We're going to ask people to clarify their goal. I'll talk more about that in a moment. We're not going to have time in our taster session today to get through to steps 3, 4, and 5. But by implementing steps 1 and 2, your conversations and the output from that are going to be much richer. So step 3 is kind of like, well, where are we at? What is it that we have done already, perhaps? Step 4, we're deciding whether to give any input. Is this where our suggestions are useful? And I've done a number of sessions around problem solving, around people coming up with creative ideas to tackle different challenges. And one of the things people find really hard is not to give their ideas and their suggestions. I did a session a few months ago with a group of female business leaders, people who are setting up their own businesses. They're all entrepreneurs at different stages of the journey. And although I said, please don't give your suggestions, people dive straight in with, have you thought about doing this? Why don't you do that? Because they were quite creative minds. They wanted to come and solve the problems. So there will be an opportunity within this model for you to make suggestions, but it's not done till later on when we've gone through steps 1, 2, and 3. And then, of course, at the end of a conversation, you're going to be summarising next steps and deciding what the follow-up might look like. So we're going to focus our time today on steps 1 and 2. And even if you only implement steps 1 and 2, I guarantee you that the quality of your conversation will be much better. People will be empowered to go off and decide what they're going to do next. And they're more likely to follow through because they've come up with those ideas themselves, and it reduces the reliance on you. And we've kind of talked about that. So I don't know if there are any questions at this stage about what we've talked about so far. There is a question, but I'm gonna, it's a good question. Thank you, Emma. I will come to that later on. So the first stage of our model then, somebody comes to you and they have a particular challenge or a problem that they're looking to solve. And we want to listen to the problem. And I said before, some people zone out, like listening. Yeah, I know what that is. I'm talking about a very particular type of listening. We're not going to ask many questions. Okay, we're going to physically pay attention. We're going to make sure that we are making eye contact if it's an in-person conversation. If it's a conversation that I'm having online on Zoom or on Teams, I'm going to be using a view where the person who I'm talking to kind of takes up most of the screen, and I'm really looking at how they're coming across, what's their non-verbal language, what's their body language, what's their tone of voice when they're saying something. I'm looking to notice, are they feeling happy, angry, upset, really tired, frustrated? Where are they at with this particular issue? Looking to identify and acknowledge both what they're saying, but also the feelings, the undercurrents, maybe things that they're not saying. I'm not going to interrupt. Okay, when we're in that listening, identifying the problem mode, we're not looking to ask more detail. Well, what happened next? Okay, let the person explain in their own words. Don't take the conversation off in a different direction. They will get there. There might be things that you want to know, well, what did such and such do? And this is the difference between a coaching conversation and a conversation that we might have with a family or friends. We're just allowing the person to explore it in their own way. Sometimes that might feel like, well, I want to know what happened. But what happened in that part of the story is less relevant to them. So they're not sharing that with you. So stick with them. Let them take the lead on the pace. We're not going to make any assumptions. And we don't yet want to skip to problem solving. Far too early in the process to be looking at what are we going to do differently. We're doing that kind of more in kind of steps 4 and 5. So we want to be asking things like, oh, tell me a bit more. Okay, yeah, sounds interesting. Yeah, tell me more. The most common question you're going to be asking in this stage is kind of, oh, tell me more, not what happened next. What did he say? What did she say? What did they do? Sometimes it's complicated. In fact, usually it's complicated, isn't it? We want this person to wind up this step 1 feeling really deeply listened to, which means we might need to listen to some of the details that to us at the outset might not seem important, but it's important to them. It's important to how they're telling the story. I was delivering this workshop in an organisation with a really mixed bunch of managers just a few weeks ago. And somebody came and said, yeah, I've got something that I'd like to use as an example and have somebody coach me about. He was explaining that as he'd literally come into the training room, he'd seen 2 people on his team stood outside the building having a bit of an argument. One person on the team is quite well known for having a bit of an argument, and that's what he kind of brought to the conversation. But it wasn't so much the fact that the colleagues were disagreeing that he was frustrated by. It was the fact that this person is very assertive, which they need to be for their job, right? That's a good skill. but to a point where they would not listen to the opinions of other people on the team. The feeling was like, this person isn't really gelling with the team. They're not making much of an effort. That's what was kind of presented as the challenge and the problem. But the underlying emotions around that was a huge sense of frustration, that this person just dismissed what the manager, what their colleagues were saying, very dismissive, didn't want to work with other people, wasn't willing to listen to a different opinion. So although it was about, okay, they were having an argument and they're always arguing and it really annoys me, it became about something else around how that team operates together, about how they deal with conflict, about how this person's views and opinions might be different to people in the team, sometimes very valid, but how they express those was something the rest of the team actually found quite difficult, and the manager in particular. So sometimes, it says sometimes it's complicated. I think usually it's complicated. There's often more going on than we might initially think. So this identifying the problem is not just the problem, but also how does the person feel about it? What's going on underneath? We want to get to a point where we're getting towards the end of this step one, where we can, what's called paraphrase back to the person. Okay, so it sounds like the problem is this. And sometimes you might get a, well, yeah, kind of, but there's also this. Then we go back to the listening, the looking to understand, holding back from asking questions, checking out maybe the kind of the feelings and the non-verbal communications. Then we're going to paraphrase it back again. And this is something when I'm delivering this session in a live room with people who are practicing on each other, very often somebody might have to paraphrase, it sounds like the problem is, several times before they get there, because this is a new skill for a lot of people. So that's absolutely fine. If we get a kind of, yeah, maybe, or a, well, not quite, because there's this, we keep going with that listening and seeking to understand. What we're looking for is we paraphrase back to the person, okay, so the problem is this. And they go, yeah, that's it, you've got it. You're looking for a yes with some kind of level of enthusiasm, with a, yeah, finally somebody gets me. We're looking to really deeply understand what's going on here. This can take a little while. It can take 3 or 4 minutes. It might take 15, 20, 25 minutes. There's no set amount of time that this might take. So for some people, it might feel like, well, somebody comes to me with a problem and I just tell them what to do. But if we haven't got to what's going on underneath, if we haven't got to the root cause of the problem and that complexity, then they're just going to be back again tomorrow or next week with the same problem, but with different symptoms. So we want to kind of dive a bit deeper and do a lot more seeking to understand in this step one. Step two is quite different. We're saying, okay, look, we've understood the problem. We've got that. Yeah, that's the issue from the person that we're working with. And we're going to ask them, what's the goal here? What would you like to see happen? Thinking back to another session that I delivered earlier on this year, and somebody said, well, what I would like to happen is for my housemate to behave in basically a completely different way and change their personality. So we had a conversation about, okay, is that realistic? This person didn't have any control over their housemate's personality and behavior, and it wasn't really something that their goal just wasn't realistic. It wasn't something that they could control or influence. So what would you like to see happen? What we don't want to do is assume that we know what the fix is. We want the words for this goal, what we're looking to achieve, to come from the person that we're looking to empower to solve the problem themselves, because only they really know what solving the problem might entail, what it might look and feel like for them. So again, we want to listen. We want to say, okay, so yeah, you said you want the behavior to be different, but in what way? We want to find out as much as we can about this goal, and then again we're paraphrasing it back and we're waiting for that sense of, yes, that's what I'm looking for. So now it's time to head to your questions about how you might use this model to help empower the people around you to solve their own problems. We're really deeply listening. We're looking to understand more about the challenge and the issue and how people feel about it. And then we're asking them, well, what's your goal? What do you want to achieve here? So I'm interested to know what questions you have. We've already got a brilliant question from Emma. I'm just going to have a quick look in the chat to see if there's any questions that I'm missing. No, so please head to the Q&A and share some questions. Okay. So Emma's question. I'm specifically interested in coaching for someone who isn't performing to their potential. Maybe they don't want to be in the role. This is a great question, Emma. Really, really good question. And I'm sure that other people will have similar experiences, actually. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking someone. We can ask that nicely. We can ask that constructively. When we're going through the model and they're bringing a problem or a challenge and we're doing that deep listening, and then we're asking them about what the goal is, they may come up with that as the goal. If somebody is underperforming, and we kind of think, well, they should be solving these issues and problems themselves, but they're not. By going through this model, that's going to really help us figure out where they're at. Have they got the skills and ability to do this? Maybe they don't feel trusted. Maybe there's something else going on. There's a whole host of things that could be happening here. So stick with it, keep exploring it. I've just got high level, top level things here, problems, I suppose. Yeah, I think if somebody doesn't want to be in the role, then they may come up with that as their goal. The goal might be to move out of the role. So we need to provide a space where we can listen, where we can ask questions, where we can seek to understand. And if that's the challenge, they might share that with us. If you're a line manager of that person, you might want to ask some more kind of generic questions around how they're getting on in the role. Yeah, I'm happy to talk with you after the session about that, Emma, because it sounds like it could potentially be quite a sensitive one. How do you coach someone who doesn't know yet what they want as an outcome? They're not in the right mindset. Lovely question. Well, you don't know what they want as an outcome either. We could take some guesses for sure. But by going through that stage one, by seeking to understand more about the challenge and problem, that's going to help them to highlight what the real issue is. I had some coaching yesterday, and a message I'd received from somebody kind of came into that conversation, and I was like, oh yeah, that was an example of me being a bit frustrated, a bit not sure how to respond, but what the coach was able to get from me was actually that it was about trust. It was about something else entirely. So I think going through that stage one will help the person to identify what an outcome might be. And if they're not in the right mindset, again, I'm just going on a snippet of information here. How do we know they're not in the right mindset? What makes us think that? Maybe they need some coaching. Maybe they're the kind of person who finds it very difficult to think on their feet. Maybe actually what they need is a bit of time to go away and think about what they want the goal to be. Maybe they find that tricky to think about. So if you're having that conversation, you've really done that, like stage one, where you've got the, yeah, that's the challenge, that's the issue. You've got that definite yes. And they're really struggling to articulate the goal. Maybe take the meeting out, go for a walk. maybe take a break, particularly if you're meeting online. Say, okay, let's just both go for a walk, mull this over. We can have a chat on the phone while we do that maybe, or let's just take a break. Let's get back together tomorrow or in half an hour. And let's really kind of explore what you would like the outcome to this to be. Looking for some more questions? I can see lots of you have got really interesting jobs from the things you posted at the beginning in the chat. People working with volunteers, moving into a talent role. So coaching and kind of empowering people is going to be central to these kind of jobs. Working with service users, working with volunteers. So yeah, don't be shy. Let's hear your questions. Got another question here. How do you help someone who lacks confidence or is bored in their role? I think they're two very different things, actually. I think if somebody is lacking in confidence, then helping them to explore what the challenge is, what the issue is, identifying those underlying feelings, what's really going on, and then helping them to identify what the target is. What is it that they want to achieve? What's their goal? Holding their hand almost through that process, taking that process slowly, one conversation at a time, is going to really help them to have more confidence in what it is that they're doing. I'd be interested to know if it's your perception that they've lacked confidence, or is it their perception? And in relation to somebody being bored in their role, then again, this is a conversation to have. And it's not an email to send. I've noticed you seem a bit bored. What's going on? These are conversations to have where we're approaching those conversations with that curiosity and that open mindset to find out more about, well, if the person is bored in their role, why? Are they ready for something new? Are they no longer interested in the work? What's driven that change in interest? How do we adapt? How might they adapt to the role? So I think let's not be shy about instigating some of those conversations. And it can feel hard, it can feel difficult, but all that listening stuff that I talked about in stage 1 of the model is really going to help you there to understand what's really going on, the details, the emotional tornadoes that might be behind some of those things. And at the end of the session, I will share my contact details if anybody wants to kind of follow up on any of these conversations. Really interesting question here. Lots of anonymous questions, so that's fine. Should you always tell the person you're coaching that you're coaching them? And I think this is a really interesting question. As a coach, part of the ethics that I sign up to, code of ethics for coaches, is we're not going to start coaching people without them knowing that they're being coached. Having said that, I've been on the receiving end of some really good coaching when I first moved into a CEO role in my previous career. Worked very closely with a mental health organisation, and Brian, who was the CEO in that organisation, we were working on some projects together, and Brian would from time to time ask me some very thought-provoking questions that actually really helped me in my career. And it wasn't until several years later that Brian and I had a conversation about that. And he's actually a coach. He's done a lot of coaching training. He's a very experienced coach. And I hugely benefited from that. So I think in a line management role, maybe you don't always need to use that coaching label, because you're not always coaching. We're talking about using coaching skills and coaching techniques. In a line management relationship or close working relationship particularly, you are still invested, you're still involved in that process and that work, and that might feel slightly different to a coach who's much more kind of removed. So I think it depends on the situation. I know the people I live with hate it if I start trying to coach them without their permission. Coaching online is harder than in person. Any tips? Yes, absolutely. I think it is. I think having a lot of these conversations is different online. Having said that, even before lockdown, I did most, if not all of most of my coaching online. I think we want to have cameras on. I think we want to be in a one-to-one situation. Particularly important to pay attention to those non-verbal cues, but also using silence. Sometimes we can get quite uncomfortable, I think, with silence. Sometimes if we ask somebody a question, or if they're just explaining something, they're thinking their answer through in their mind. They're kind of thinking about what are their thoughts and their feelings in relation to this. They're trying to organize and order their views and the words that are going to come out. And while that's happening, we're kind of sat in silence, and it might feel a bit weird or a bit uncomfortable. So just kind of learning to sit with that silence and be okay with that. Not looking to move in and fill silences as soon as they happen, because that's somebody's thinking space. That's the time somebody's kind of ordering and organizing their thoughts. Another lovely question here about succession planning. Big fan of succession planning, hugely important. How do you help someone to step up in their role for succession planning is the question. And I think coaching them through a lot of the problems that they might be looking to solve. Certainly using this model is going to help empower them. It's going to help them to recognize some of the skills that they might have. It might be appropriate to explain that that's what you're doing. Yeah, you're thinking about succession planning and what the future might look like. There might be times where you might not want to raise somebody's expectations, perhaps. So that will kind of depend on your judgment in that situation. Just thinking if anything else I want to say about that one before we move on. And I think also asking them, like, where do you want to increase your confidence? You know, if you're going to be stepping up within the organization in the coming weeks, months, years, whatever it might be, what gaps do you feel you have in your skills, your knowledge, your training? Okay, I've got another question here. As someone who is fairly new to coaching, being the coach, are there any key tips you can share when coaching someone for the first time? Any particular approaches that are key? Yeah, that listening. I think certainly when I first started coaching, you want to dive in and help. I'm one of those irritating, helpful people who love coming up with ideas. And I found it very difficult to just hold on to my ideas and not share them. Because when you share them, you might say, have you thought about doing X, Y, and Z? But that's still a leading question. It's still a question when you're kind of suggesting in your answer that is the answer. So we want to move away from that. We want to not share our suggestions and ideas unless the person is really genuinely very, very stuck and they don't know. And you can give them some space, you can give them some silence, you can give them some time to come up with those ideas, but they don't know. Then it's appropriate to share your thoughts and your views. But otherwise, I would say that's probably one of the hardest things. One of the ways you might overcome that, I've done some action learning before, and John Newton, who was facilitating the action learning I did most recently, had a wonderful suggestion, which was to just write down your ideas and suggestions on a piece of paper. And then after the session, you can look through them and think, actually, do I need to share those? Or actually, the person's come up with their own ideas. That's good. They're nearer to the information. They're nearer to the problem that's looking to be solved than you are. So like their ideas are good. Coaching assumes that the person is whole, can think for themselves, can be a creative individual and follow through on their ideas. So I think just kind of thinking about how you hold on to that when you first begin coaching. And particularly if you're doing the sessions online, you might want to record some of them just to look back at them and see if there's anything you might do differently next time. So much to say about that. Sorry, I get excited about coaching. It's cool. Any tips for coaching over the phone when it's your only option? Would this be similar to the online versus in-person question? Yeah, absolutely. I did coach somebody for a while who preferred to do the coaching over the phone rather than in person. And And when we had done some sessions in person or online, I noticed she closed her eyes. So if I asked her a question, she'd close her eyes to help her think. She said, actually, rather than me sitting here with my eyes closed and feeling a bit self-conscious about that, can we do it over the phone? So yeah, that's absolutely fine. We have to listen in a different way. We don't see the body language, right? That's the thing that's missing. So we might say, you're sounding kind of frustrated. Is that what's happening? We might need to be a bit more direct, maybe, about some of those questions. But we're listening for, how does the person sound? Giving plenty of pauses, not diving in and interrupting. We want that person to be able to finish their thoughts. Unless, of course, we're going around in circles and they're sharing the same thoughts over again. That's where you might dive in and paraphrase. This is what I'm hearing. Is that right? And you're going to get that yes or that kind of not quite. Some brilliant questions. We have got time for another couple of questions if there are any more. Just give you another moment or two to share those. If you have any other questions, then there's a couple more slides for me to share with you. Allowing the silence, particularly online, is something I find difficult. Yeah, it is difficult. Yeah, but still worth doing. So stick with it. Because although you might be kind of thinking, oh, there's silence, I don't know what to say, they might be thinking, oh, what else have I got to say about this? And very often that's where kind of the gems, the reflection, the light bulb moments, if you like, can happen. So just take some deep breaths and stick with it. Awesome. Thank you for your questions. We have got a couple of minutes to spare, so if you have got any questions, they will get answered. Don't be shy about sharing them there. What I'm inviting you to do going forward from this session today is to identify somebody on your team or somebody in your working world that you're going to practice this new skill with. And after those conversations, evaluating what you did well, what might you do differently next time? So that might be around the silence, if the silence uncomfortable, whatever it might be. And then when you get comfortable with that, you might start using that with others in the team as well. Almost finished, but not quite. It might be that you're looking for some more of this. I'm just sharing in the chat my contact details and a link to my calendar. So if you would like some more help with any of this, you can reach out and let me know. My colleague Diane, who's based at head office, there's also the Calendly link there for her. I do have some availability in the next few weeks, but I'm spending quite a lot of time delivering our training courses, so I'm not always available. But if you would like some more help with this, we do the 3-hour coaching to empower session in-house for you and your colleagues. So we can come along, we'll go through steps 1 and 2, which we've done today, but we'll do 3, 4, 5. There's an opportunity for you to practice, to get some feedback on your coaching. We don't deal with role plays, we deal with real life stuff. We have some more free webinars coming up. The 4th of October, we're doing a session around email. I can just think my titles there disappeared for some reason. We've also got another session on the 24th of October. Looks like we're doing well for sessions in October. This is good. How to make your email life suck less and high functioning fear are the 2 October sessions. So if you would like to talk more about Think Productive, the sessions that we offer, or if you just want to kind of expand on these conversations and have further questions around coaching, do please get in touch. We have some public workshops coming up on the 2nd of November. Graham Alcott, who's the founder, the author of the book, How to Be Productivity Ninja, is doing our 6-week to Ninja course. And that's going to be in the evenings. We do daytime ones in-house if that's of interest to you. And we're doing our Project Management 101 session in November as well. We do a whole load of stuff at Think Productive. Fixing meetings is a particular favourite of mine. Graham and I wrote a book called How to Fix Meetings. So we can help you with making your meetings rare, fun and productive again. We do some sessions around giving and receiving feedback, the we need to talk session, influencing and persuading, if that's something that would be helpful to you, delegation and thinking about the 4 tendencies, why people respond to different requests, and how we ask people to do things based on their tendencies. That's something I'm particularly interested in. The coaching to empower session, you've had a little taster of that. That's something that we go into a bit more detail on our high performance manager program. We have 3 levels of leadership and management programs. And again, if you're interested, please book a slot with Dee to talk in a bit more detail about these. We do these once a year as a public workshop. We're on cohort 2 at the moment of the high performance manager. And then we have the influential leader and the visionary leader available as well. These are great sessions. It's says there 12 to 20 weeks, kind of depending on your timescales. We do a workshop online, and then the following week you do what we call an implementation clinic. So you get together with a smaller group of people on that cohort to get some kind of coaching, mastermind type sessions, get your questions answered, see how you're getting on with implementing the changes that you've identified. Do please keep in touch. I'd love to hear from you. My details, my LinkedIn profile, my email, my phone number, and how to book a slot with me or my colleague Dee are all in the chat there for you. I will stick around if you have any further questions, but I will stop recording the session.